You cannot get your freedom and you cannot get the independence by waiting somebody to give it. So you need to take it yourself. And that comes back to the Kurdish long history also about the armed rebellion. And particularly this last 30 years through the PKK's military war or resistance in Turkey, it has made a tremendous changes. But always this Kurdish problem in the region is this question of foreign states and those regional powers divide and rule issue. And I think in the Kurdistan now there is a, particularly now after ISIS entered the area, has been there is this two fractions in the Kurdish movement. One of this is what is called now very often in mainstream media Kurdistan, which refers to the actually in the Kurdish region very small minority in the Iraqi Kurdistan regional government, which is the, so to say, friend of the West. So it's been always this talk about good Kurds, bad Kurds. And now particularly within this credibility in fights against ISIS, this, so to say, Kurdish rebellion movement with background with PKK has now the strongest momentum and has been proving actually the only military force that has been able to create a counterforce against the ISIS. And now the question comes how the Western powers are taking stand, and also their political agenda with this democratic autonomy, how much they can also create the model of different nations, ethnic, religious, to live together and build the democracy. And certainly this is not in favor with some of those Kurdish rulers. I'm referring now to this Barzani-led Kurdistan regional government, which very clearly now also in the Kurdish consciousness is tied with the politics of Turkey. And so now the big question is now so the Kurds have always, like they've been saying, mountains are our only friends. So they are very conscious and careful also. So my actually first contact and even knowing about the Kurds, it was early 1980s. And I think on the 1984 I made my first visit to the Kurdistan in Turkish side. And at that time nobody knew about the Kurds. They were only some small news could be found that in Finnish news that the American expedition team has found the Ark of Noah in the mountain Ararat, and there were some strange guerrillas there that were preventing the expedition work. So I started to learn more about the Kurds and started to spend quite a lot of time first in the Turkish Kurdistan, and then after the Gulf War, '92, I traveled also to Iraqi Kurdistan, and during that time we had some programs also there. And in the early 90s also those first Kurdish refugees started to come to Finland, and partly from the Iraqi Kurdistan after this war, and partly from Turkey politically. And also in this kind of consciousness and how you say empowerment within the Kurdish community. And the only factor that I could see that has done this has been the armed struggle that the PKK started in 1984. And that has forced during these years some changes in the Turkish state regarding the Kurds, but still, as most of us know, those basic rights are denied from the Kurds. You still see this background of Kurds without having any own state, and all this divide and rule politics that is also dividing Kurds. So, like many Kurds are saying now, that Kurds are very good in fighting. They are very good in organizing themselves to make resistance. But how to do politics, particularly outside Kurdistan, that has been the issue. And if you compare the Kurdish community, what I have seen like in Kurdistan and Europe, I can say even that the Kurds in Kurdistan are much more progressive, much more liberal than the Kurdish community in Europe. And one key factor in that one has been the role of Kurdish civil society that very often is neglected when we discuss and analyze the situation there. That has evolved first, particularly in the northern Kurdistan. Turkey has grown very strong civil society that has its political strong representative already, and a lot of civil society organizations, a lot of self-organized group as part of the Kurdish movement. This hasn't been analyzed enough. But if you compare the Kurdish civil society in Europe, that is very weak or concentrated more on talking about Kurdistan, not so much of doing concrete things. And there is some Kurdish intellectuals who are now openly requested the Kobane administration to resign. But if you really think Kobane and those YPG there, that suddenly ISIS have been able to massacre 230 civilians right in the center of the city. So there is a lot of this kind of questions besides this Turkish role. But so that is the reason why they are also, I think, having quite big meetings now going on, because although somebody is really provocating, and Kurds may have, some Kurdish elements have their interest also. So now the question with Turkey and international politics, and because all these provocations is also particularly targeted to this pluralistic model of self-administration. And some have interest of strengthening this Kurdish nationalism. And so there is a different levels. And then it's a question, these two approaches for this independence, like the question of democratic autonomy within the present day state borders. And the second issue from this Kurdish point of view, talking about the Kurdistan. So these are two levels from the Kurdish point of view. And this issue then from the Western power, how they now take a stand with Turkey. So either Kurds to start also in Syria, talking about establishing really an own state, mini-state in northern Syria, and not talking anymore about this third way. I think in the ground level, I would say, because it's such a big difference, the whole last century, Kurds have lived in those nation states, Turkey, Syria, Iran, Iraq, and all of them have their unique features. So there is two levels. One thing is this Kurdish nationalism as Kurdistan, which all favor. But the second thing, dealing with the all-day life and politics, and this is partly in the North Kurdistan, Turkey, and in the Syria, where people have already forgotten the idea of nation state or becoming, so to say, independent state. Same goes with Iranian Kurdish movement now. So they talk about this democratic autonomy and confederalism within their host countries. But now this development and the proxy politics and the provocations may force Kurds to take more of this Kurdistan approach. It's a very important, interesting question, and we need to deal with this issue of, let's call it like role of minorities but when you deal with Kurds, then we talk about the nation of with a long history, with more than 40 million people in the region, and as they've been saying, it's the largest nation without the own nation state. But there is always this question that Kurds have been like a minority in their nation state that was created after the First World War. But when you compare with maybe with some smaller ethnic minorities like in Karelia, I think it comes the same issue with this cultural autonomy and the need to emphasize and the importance of keeping up the own culture, particularly own language, and how the host state is responding to those very basic human rights, cultural rights. This is very important issue for Kurds, has always been. And as long as those host countries are not respecting those rights, also this Kurdish nationalistic movement and the resistance will keep strong. But if those reforms are made, then many of this kind of, how you say, balance of issue changing. But compared to the, comparing smaller minorities like Karelians and respect to Finland, it's a question that Kurds are now very powerful, and it's a powerful actor, so they have also now this, particularly during this last, let's say 10 years, particularly because of their resistance, also military, they have a power. And particularly now in the situation in the Middle East, so that makes it a little bit difficult to compare with some minorities. So there is different levels. One of this cultural autonomy, basic human rights, and the second thing is more of political and how you say, in Kurdistan case, it's also now this military counterforce against the terrorism in the Middle East. I think then we need definitely talk about the role of the Kurds in the Syria war and the experience and model that Kurds have developed during this last 3-4 years in the northern Syria called Rojava. And they have done that by themselves, by their grassroots activities, without any outside support and knowledge. And now, in fact, they are those only counterforce regarding to democracy building, but particularly also combined to that one militarily against those destruction in the region. And it is a very unique model based on what Kurds have been saying for a long time as a third way solution. So they don't take sides, but they build on the ground root democracy together with all those different ethnic religious groups in the region. And this has been very much sometimes discussed in the media, that this is the one thing that makes ISIS so afraid of those. But the fact is really that the role of the women guerrillas in this resistance, what I know that almost 40% of the fighters, they are women, and they have their own military wing, even so that the women are as the commanders, not just as soldiers. And this is part of the whole Kurdish ideology for long already, to have this women emancipation. And I think this is one of those factors that really has created also the strength that the Kurdish communities have in the civil society and how it's done in the administration. So people have a reason to fight for their rights and for their land.